You've decided you're ready to become a parent, and suddenly you're overwhelmed with people who feel they have the right to inform you on the correct way to conceive, give birth, what fears you should have, and the proper way to parent. How do you filter through the opinions? How do you know what's trustworthy information and what's a myth or just plain outdated? Welcome to the Birth.If podcast. Join your host Michelle Smith and her guests as they cut through the noise and fear by sharing valuable tips, tools, and proven methods that help you connect with your own inner wisdom as you navigate the sacred journey that is pregnancy, birth, and parenthood in a more relaxed and confident manner. This podcast does not constitute, nor is it intended, as medical advice.
Hello, Birth.If families. I'm your host, Michelle Smith, and I want to welcome you to my Listening to Midwives series. With this series, it is my intention to create a sacred space for midwives to voice what is on their heart and in their soul. This series is for anyone that loves and supports midwives, or for someone that wants a deeper understanding of what midwifery care truly is. If you are a fellow birth worker listening to this podcast, get ready to hear some of the names of the icons in our birth world being mentioned in this conversation with Jae Rowan and Rhione Zeixchel, owners of Sanctuary Birthing. These incredible women have worked with and learned from the icons in our birth field, whose books are sitting in a special place in my own bookshelf, and perhaps they are in yours as well. We recorded this episode several months ago, and as I edited the episode this week, I got huge goosebumps as I re-listened to the story Rhione shares that has guided her own journey as a midwife. The significance of this story is really hitting me regarding the challenges birthing women and hospital staff are facing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea and settle back to soak up the wisdom of these sage birth keepers and the brilliant project that they are up to now. Welcome, Jae and Rhione, to the Birth.If podcast. I am so incredibly honored and grateful to have you here with me today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'd like to have each of you introduce your work. So if you would like to go first, Rhione, because you have 60 years combined experience together in midwifery, correct?
Yes. Well, that's a good estimate. It's at least that, yes.
Yeah. I should say over 60 years, yes. So if you'd like to go ahead, Rhione, please, and share a bit about who you are as a midwife and a little bit about what brought you into this work. And then we'll share what is on your hearts and this exciting project that you have in the works for moms.
Well, what brought me to this work? There was no one thing. I just woke up one day, or in a moment, I woke up in my 20s and realized, oh my gosh, I'm a midwife. And that was after a few years of agonizing, soul-searching, feeling like there's this really special, important thing that I'm led to do, but I didn't know what it was. I was really lost and looking for, what is this thing? Because I can feel it. It has to do with women, and I felt like it had to do with women and rhythms. Interesting. So this is Rhione in her 20s, just being lost and wondering how to find, what is this thing that's calling me? And then one day I was on the phone with a friend, and she had been at her friend's birth in the hospital, and this was something very unusual. We didn't talk about birth. It wasn't part of my thinking, really. And she said, yeah, there was a midwife there. And when she said the word midwife, it was like this waterfall of brilliance inside of me, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm a midwife. I mean, isn't that strange? But that's actually how it happened. And it was so profound that I immediately took action. The background before that is that my grandmother, my mother's mother, had all her children at home. That's how it was done. She lived on a farm in rural central Pennsylvania, and they had all their babies at home. And so that was just like normalized. When I was sitting by my grandma, I knew she did this. She had her babies at home. And then my mother was a nurse, and she was very much, I'm sure she was a great nurse, and she was very much given over to the medical system at the time. So she would never want anyone to have a home birth, of course. But so then I went on and came to that moment in my 20s, many, many years later, realizing I was the midwife, and it's something that had never been described to me or talked about. So that's the beginning.
That's a wonderful story that we have parallels in that.
Oh.
My grandma had her children at home, except for the last 3, and she gave birth to 14 living children and also had a couple stillbirths in there. But as I'm listening to your stories, and my mom's a nurse, and
oh my gosh,
I'm a doula, and more, love home birth and things. And so there's just these parallels and how birth can call to you from the time you're young.
Thank you. That's the word, called to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very surprised when that moment happened.
So where did your career go from there?
It went to, literally on that afternoon, after that phone call, I ran down to the Boston Women's Health Collective. I was living in Cambridge at the time. I ran down there, and every textbook they had that had anything to do with midwifery, I bought it, and I just dove in. However, the real training came because I quickly after that got pregnant myself, and that was very exciting. And I had a miscarriage, and that was also super stunning for me. And I realized, interesting, with that miscarriage, of course, I was shocked and I was grieving, but I was mostly like, whoa, my body can do this. I was so amazed at the woman's body. So I was still quite like full of that passion. And then I very quickly got pregnant with my oldest son. And the midwife I found to help me with that birth, she just looked at me. She was extremely experienced and very intuitive, really, really intuitive. I called her a spiritual midwife. And that was in Hawaii. And she said, I will teach you anything you want to know. Anything. Like, she just looked at me and said, I can download anything you want to know. And in reality, that didn't turn into like we sat in classes together or anything. It really was me imbibing a lot of her wisdom through her helping me at the birth. And I still have so much appreciation for everything I learned during that pregnancy, birth, postpartum. So you know what I was doing. I was having a baby and experiencing that, and then learning what it is to be a parent and nurse a baby, and still having this vibrating ball of passion in my heart that I'm going to be a midwife. I'm a midwife. I don't know how that's going to happen. And then when my son was, I'm guessing it was between 1.5 and 2 years old, I had a talk with my friend who was working at an herb shop, which was owned by Rosemary Gladstar. And now we're back in Northern California. So my friend said, oh, well, Nan, she's teaching something to all the naturopathic students, a big midwifery course, and you should connect with her. And she was referring to Nan Kohler. Nan and Rosemary were really good friends. And I remember knowing at that moment, I have to talk to Nan. And I was also fairly petrified because I'm shy and what was I going to say? But once I made the connection with her and said I'd like to be part of that class, she was open arms. I mean, it's like we recognized each other and it was immediate. And that I took that class, but I went on to be her student. She and her husband, who was a doctor at that time, did home births together, and they both taught classes to a small group of students, and I joined them and then later became her apprentice. So that's the quick summary. So I have nothing but gratitude to Rosemary. I'm sure she doesn't know me, but she changed my life, Rosemary Gladstar, and what I learned from her in association with Nan and what Nan passed on to me about the normalcy of birth and how to be with a woman in labor. And Janine Parvati Baker just was routinely coming through there and hanging out and giving classes in big circles. And certainly from Janine, I learned about accessing the deep inner knowing. I mean, that she would go there. And that was lovely for me. That was that made sense to me. So, and then it all just grew. I had a few more children and it kept growing and helping women.
It's so wonderful for me to hear your story because these are names of people that I know and admire that you've worked with personally. I'm so glad you shared the history.
I feel so lucky. I mean, how lucky is that?
Yeah.
I am so lucky. It's not just in a book. I was with those people and heard what they had to say and walked up the road with them and took a walk across the land and sat in circle. Yeah, I'm so grateful.
Wow.
I'm sure that informs the wisdom that happened back then. I'm sure it's still informing my everyday life right now and how I work with women, of course.
I'm sure. Again, thank you for sharing that history. Those of us that are all birth junkies will all be like, oh my gosh, she sat with them and knew that. So it was so great. So Jae, do you mind sharing what brought you to midwifery and birth, please?
Yeah, so for me, there's some similarity in that I grew up hearing about my grandmother. She both birthed 13 children on a rural farm as well as helped women have babies. I think probably in the way that a community midwife helped women back then. And my mother had some traumatic birth experiences. She had one before me. And so she really didn't talk to me about birth at all, which I guess ultimately is a good thing. So I more just kind of knew about my grandmother's stories. And I guess the story I told myself is, well, wow, she could do it. It must be a natural thing. And my mom was her last pregnancy and she had twins. And she delivered those unassisted just with her husband, my grandfather. So that was like one of the main stories that I knew. And that was because the doctor at the time in their area who was helping with birth was not someone she trusted. Let's put it that way. So in any case, I was also just a super active kid and probably went to the emergency room a number of times, because I smashed this or I twisted that or whatever, and so for me, the hospital was just something I really associated with that more than like, oh, this is a place you have babies. So when I became pregnant pretty young, I was pregnant at early in my 20th year. It just never occurred to me to like, oh, I'm going to find a doctor and go to the hospital and have my baby. I probably didn't think about it real clearly, but at the same time, I wasn't drawn in that direction and I wasn't afraid. And there was a free clinic where I was living and I was getting prenatal care there while I was deciding what I wanted to do. And they gave me a list of midwives. And at the time in California, midwifery was illegal. So it was pretty cool that they could give you a list of people's names and phone numbers. And so I ended up working with a midwife that worked, two midwives that worked as a team. and had my first baby at home. And I, there's a lot of things I learned in that experience. I mean, part of it was just I had a background from a young age in yoga and relaxation. And I had this kind of amazing moment after he was born where I realized, wow, if I had relaxed more, that would have been really different. It was just one of those like download experiences where no one said anything to me. I just had it because I knew relaxation in my body, because I'd had a experience of that and practicing yoga and deep relaxation and things like that. I realized that, and that's a very foundational thing for me in my practice as a midwife. But anyway, so that's kind of how I came to birth. And then in terms of becoming a midwife, my first was maybe 2, and I was at a baby fair, and there was a midwife there who was offering a 10-week class. And I was there with a friend, and we decided to take her class. I had never thought about being a midwife of mine, and I kind of have a scientific mind, and I had been studying biology and chemistry in college, and that kind of got interrupted by starting a family. But, I was interested in it, and that kind of started my journey as a midwife, working with her. I worked with her for like 3 years. After taking her class, I had 2 more children, 1 child while I was kind of working with her, and then got pregnant with a 3rd and moved to Oregon from California. And so that I kind of took a hiatus from midwifery, but I ended up deciding, I saw a sign for Rhione was offering a similar kind of class. And even though it was a basic midwifery class and I'd already taken that before, I thought, well, maybe this is a way to just kind of get back into midwifery. My youngest child was 2 or 3 at that point, and I think I was feeling like, okay, maybe I can get back into this again. And so, yeah, that was my journey. And I, interestingly enough, also studied with Nan Kohler, but kind of in a different capacity. She was offering us kind of a summer school that lasted for, I think, like a month. And I ended up going and staying up in Sebastopol for a month and doing this, it was like classes every day. And it was after I had my second baby. And I had also just taken a lot of different workshops. I took a couple workshops with her as well prior to that. So I'd already had some experience. And I'm kind of a voracious learner and kind of a nerdy person in a lot of ways. And I just like to keep learning and keep studying and growing in different ways. So I just immersed myself in it. And not as long a story as Rhione's, but it's a journey that's continued many years. So.
Wow. So how did the two of you begin working together? You took her class, right,
I took
Jae?
her
And then where did
class,
it?
and I think that, this is what I remember, Rhione, is just that you kind of reached out.
I actually don't remember. I'm so excited to hear this.
Well, I do, because, well, just I was the most experienced person in the class. So you kind of reached out to me, and I think at that time we're maybe looking for an apprentice. I think you were in a little bit of a transition of who you were working with and whatnot, but you invited me to go to a birth, and I had it was an interesting birth because there were 4 midwives that were involved with this birth, and I think you were still kind of working as a team to some degree. And this mom was a close friend of yours, but also someone who had been riding horses her whole life, and she had a long labor that lasted over several days. And so I got called in kind of at the maybe like the beginning of the 3rd day or something. And when we had met prior, like you and the other midwives, they had told me, well, we'd like you to take notes about this and that. And when someone tells me they want me to do X, then I just do X, So I took all these notes and just pretty much did exactly what they wanted me to do. And we kept working together for a year or so before you took a break. But that kind of got me back into midwifery in this area. It was a little hard when you move to a new place. Sometimes it can be hard to get into the community and start working with midwives. And so, yeah, that's how we started working together. And then I had a 4th baby. And then we just started working together again. That next year when my daughter was 11 months, we went to the first of 4 births together in that year. And then we just kind of been working on and off together ever since.
So with all of this experience that you both have and knowing some of the really greats in the birth field, Because I know there's such a wealth of knowledge between you two. What are some of the changes that you've seen that excite you in birth? And what are some of the changes that you've seen that are perhaps painful to your heart as birth has evolved all these years? Does that question make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jae, how about you?
Well, I think that the changes that excite me, I get really excited about all the people who are doing work to bring birth back to women, for women to own that. And I feel like, Marie Mongan was probably the first person that I really heard say that a lot, because we studied with her in 2001. I loved that her whole focus was to return birth back to families. That was really instrumental for me in understanding birth differently and moving from being, someone who thought of myself as knowing, to recognizing that this is a partnership. We're working with women. They know themselves the best, and we are working with them to help build their health. And there was another midwife that I studied with who I wish that I had prepared with her name right now, but I went to this 5-day workshop in Eugene. She was I think she was German, but living in Italy. And that was her whole focus of that 5 days. It was all building from signs of health. What are the signs that you see as healthy, and work from that perspective. And I loved that, looking at it from that perspective, rather than I'm the midwife, I'm going to tell you how to do this and I know better than you kind of thing. So all of the work that's being done now, evidence-based birth and Kristen Pascucci and Improved Birth, and there's so many different people working to help women really feel empowered in this experience, rather than, this is your first baby, you don't know what you're doing, listen to your doctor or whoever, your midwife. Instead, to be, how can you listen to your own body? How can you learn from your body? How can we help you to learn what you need to learn to really be prepared, to be confident, to really own this experience? And that's all the part that really excites me about birth. And the parts that really break my heart, and maybe this is some that you want to speak to more, Rhione, but women are just being traumatized and abused in birth in horrible ways. I mean, it's just like, to me, it's what really fuels my passion to keep working, rather than just retiring after this long career, to really be a part of the change that help women understand that they can be in charge, that they do have a choice, that they do not have to be traumatized in this experience, and to hopefully be a part of changing this broken system in the US.
I agree about the trauma. And I interviewed a holistic pediatric nurse practitioner. And one of the things that she said that she's noticing lately working with the babies is the birth trauma, not only for mom, but for the babies. And it's amazing to me to think what we just celebrated 100 years since women could vote. So in a way, it makes sense that we've had to really strive to take back our rights, our autonomy in birth and over our bodies. And it's sad that we're still experiencing that, but at least there are these big changes happening. And I did my hypnobirthing training in 2002, and I am so grateful for Marie Mongan. She really did do so much for empowering families in the natural birth movement. But unfortunately, we still have so much to do, because I feel like women are they're afraid. They're afraid to trust their body. They're afraid to trust their babies. They're told what a horrible experience birth is going to be by most people in the media. And I don't know if you find that to be true as well, but sometimes there's a lot of work to do just to help women to trust themselves again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of them maybe never have trusted themselves, and certainly not in this realm of birth where everyone's told to do what's safest, and what they believe is safest is just to go to the hospital and kind of move through the experience in that way, not knowing what that experience might be like, or that you have choices. So
Yeah, I think women don't realize they have options. I think you get kind of conditioned to just go to the OB, go to the doctor, and you do what you're told, right? And I remember a midwife friend of mine talking about, what other capacity in life do you, if you go to buy a car, you don't sit in the office with the people that you've never met and sit there just sitting in a little paper gown with a paper towel over you, right? But that's what happens when we have our first visit with our practitioner. How often do women start their visit with this physician that they don't know, and sometimes midwife that they don't know, and you're completely naked and vulnerable? But midwives tend to, when I was working with midwives here in Orlando, we would always, women, they would have their visit first. And then the midwife, they would ask them if they were ready for their exam, and then they'd have them undress and wait and then come back in. Am I making any sense when I'm conveying just how we unknowingly give our power away at times? And we're so vulnerable in birth
Yes,
because of the way it's set up.
totally.
Michelle, I want to tell a story.
Please.
Like, I didn't know that I would talk about this, and in fact, it just came to me now. But your question about what are you excited about, I wanted Jae to answer because I'm like, oh, am I excited? But when Jae was talking, I second everything she said, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm excited about all of that. And I'm excited that we can be on a podcast talking about this. That's pretty cool. There's a movement, and I certainly expected that. I thought we would be further along. And now you're describing, again, women not trusting themselves, women being afraid. A woman, that picture you just gave, it's like, oh, here, you're pregnant, sit here in a gown, pee in a cup, and fill out this form, and then someone will examine you.
Right.
I mean, it's so horrific to me. That picture, maybe it's not horrific to everybody, but to me, it gives me chills, what you just said. So here's the story. It's actually a story of a dream. It's a dream I had, but I had been midwifing, and as well as I had 4 sons, so it must have been after 1988. I was doing a lot of inner work, deep inner work, and I had a big impulse that I needed a vision quest. And I didn't even really know what that meant, but I felt like there's something I need to do on my own to get deeper insight, and I called it a vision quest. And I actually don't remember anymore how that all got filled out in my brain, but I did indeed have a vision quest, and it was in the winter months. What that meant was I got someone to stay with my kids, and I was a single parent at that time, and I went off by myself for a day and an overnight and came back the next day. I stayed alone in a cabin on the mountain, and I received a lot. That's not what my story's about. So then I came home, and it's the day after the vision quest, and I'm in a big open space internally with my life, with my work, and just open to receiving. And that night in bed, I had this dream. And oh my gosh, here I am so many years later, still being motivated by that dream.
Wow.
And the dream was really simple. I was looking in at a scene. So all I know is I'm looking in at a scene, and I go in that room and I'm watching. And in the room, there's a woman in a hospital bed, just classic. She has a hospital gown on. It all looks like a hospital. And she's in the bed alone. And she's looking up at her doctor plaintively, just like vulnerable, helpless kind of look. And she's looking up at her doctor and saying, "How much longer, doctor? How much longer?" And I was looking at that. And then above that scene, this is crazy. Oh my God. Above that scene, there floats in these 2 corporate executive men in suits, and they were corporate executive guys that had to do with this hospital. So they were placeholders for that role, and they're having a talk, and I'm hearing their talk. And it's all about needing money, needing to raise, we have to get more, and how can we make more money? Mm-hmm. That's the big scene that was over this woman going, help me, doctor. And then I was like, whoa. And I backed off from that, walked outside the little room that I had walked into. And then I got this message. And it came in the form of a banner. Oh my gosh. I'm a little embarrassed to say all this. But anyway, it came in the form of a banner draped over my mind, or the space in front of me in my mind. And it said, "This must die."
Wow.
So it was talking about the scene I had just witnessed. Basically, I was given the whole story. Here's the story. And then as I was leaving, this must die.
Wow.
And I was blown away. And I was also very motivated. I think that speaks to what we were talking about. It's like, what is our motivation? It's like midwifery, certainly being a home birth midwife. We've taken on over the years a midwifery path where we show up 100%. And I know you know what that means. Sometimes that is really, really hard. Really, really hard over the course of a life for a human to do that. And that dream, I think, gave me strength, gave me motivation, it's like, yeah, keep on going. And it's actually why we're having this talk right now, because we're not done. We're not done yet. We need to keep going.
Yeah. It's so significant. I have tears. I'm teary because I just attended a beautiful, beautiful birth yesterday. Gorgeous. And the doctor very much used informed consent. And it was so nice to see. And overall, it's come so far. But there's still things, sometimes work to be done in women taking back their autonomy and women taking back birth, because it doesn't always happen that way. And I am so incredibly grateful that you felt comfortable enough to share that story, because those of us that are here to serve women and babies and families, we need to hear those kind of stories. So thank you.
Women need to know of course there are health issues. Of course there are issues. I mean, it's not like, oh, everyone just have your baby, it'll all be fine. I mean, you need help. Right. You need to do the research. You need to become informed. You need some guidance. You need to know how to trust your own impulses. But basically, yes, women need to have autonomy. Oh my goodness, this is about their own body. This is about the baby inside of them. Who knows most about that baby? Women need to know that it can be in their hands. And just as you saw at the beautiful birth you just attended, yes, with respect, consideration, informed choice, women can have these beautiful births with their helpers around them and still be in their autonomy and still be owning their births. But sadly, that is not normal here. That is not the norm. And we want to take it back, right? It's like a message. You can take back your birth. Let's figure that out. And don't be naive and think that in this system that we live in today, you will be handed that, because you will not.
Right.
you will not be handed it.
Right. Unless you fall into the right OB practice and a really supportive hospital. It saddens me sometimes as a doula. People tell you, I want this type of birth. And then you say, well, you might really want to consider this practice, this hospital, because where you're going, in my experience, I'm not sure you're going to be able to get it there unless you fight really, really hard. And even then, sometimes there's lip service. I'm not trying to be really negative with the medical community, but because we can have such a wonderful collaboration, but it saddens me when women will say, this was my fear. This wasn't what I wanted, or I wish I hadn't been so afraid to change practices. And now here in Florida, it's getting hard to do that. Some practices you can't change after 28 weeks. They won't take patients after 28 weeks of pregnancy. So what do? You're kind of in that system. So research is important.
Research is important, and finding out what's important to you.
Yes, yes.
Not what your sister did or your friend did or what your mother thinks you should do. What's the most important thing to you? And then being able to do the research. I want to clarify. I mean, after I heard myself tell the dream and realized what the words in the banner were, this must die, it's like, I don't want to scare people. It's not that I want our wonderful doctors and nurses and our labor and delivery staff to disappear. Like, they've been godsends to us. That's not what I'm talking about. It's the bigger system that is steering step by step, steering our healthcare into something put on us in a factory-like way, instead of it's coming from what the individual needs. I mean, every woman is special, is individual. So I'm clarifying. I hope that wasn't scary, what I said. I didn't mean to be dissing on medical personnel as much as we need to wake up.
Right, right. Because often it can be the system, because there's midwives and physicians and nurses that want to support women, and the way the mechanisms and the protocols of the hospital are, it makes it difficult.
Exactly.
Or they get shamed and bullied.
Or they lose their jobs,
Yes,
as outliers wanting to take care of people in an individual way. There was a doctor who lost her job in a hospital in our area, and it seemed pretty clear that it was coming from that. And I think it's really hard. It's really hard if you believe in something different than what the system is telling you to do. People are worried about job security, or they're worried about losing their license, especially nurses. I think
right.
A lot of fear for nurses about not even understanding what their rights as nurses are in taking care of women with birth. And so I think from the perspective that this is the situation in the system, and the fact that we are a monetary system, it's based on money, it's the people that have to make the change happen.
Nice.
Yes.
Good.
I feel like with the rest of us as midwives and doctors and nurses, the people who want change, and this isn't something that can happen right before someone has their baby. It's a rare person who can suddenly have a radical transformation right before they have their baby. That's why I think for us that we're so passionate about the new program that we've created, is because we understand that this is something that, you plant the seeds for in your mind, and that you work with throughout your pregnancy on many different levels, so that when you walk into your hospital and your birth, you are confident, you are empowered, you know what your rights are. I mean, there's a lot of ways that women can be supported. And I feel like the change, when it comes from the parents, the mothers themselves, it's hard for the system to say no.
Right.
Yeah. And when one person here and there, sure, they can say, well, that's a unicorn birth or whatever. But I mean, the more people, I feel like with all the change that's happening, all the different people that are working really hard on that change and reaching women and families about change, with all of this happening, the more support families can get in that day-to-day preparation for their birth experience, the more likely they're going to be able to create a different experience for themselves, the experience that they want. And even if it doesn't go exactly as they want it to, knowing that they've invested themselves fully in that process, then they're there to make the choices with their care provider. They can't just get scared into making choices. They can recognize, okay, I'm making this choice now because this feels like the best choice in this moment. I've given it my all. And
Yes, 100%. I agree. And when you have caregivers that listen and present the options and give families the opportunity to weigh the pros and cons and make that decision, I feel like even if their birth doesn't go the way they planned, as you mentioned, that there's less trauma around it because they do feel like they had those options and they were heard, and they may need to grieve the birth that they didn't have, but I find they don't have the same amount of trauma around it.
Yes, of course, that's true.
And so tell me more about your program.
so basically, we have spent the last probably 15 months working with the knowledge that we have about how we've worked one-on-one with people as home birth midwives, providing care from early pregnancy through the early postpartum or early period of new parenting. And we basically have organized that knowledge in a way that allows us to put it into a kind of what we're calling a journey, owning your amazing birth journey.
I love that.
And the idea that we had in the beginning, and we've been, just like you had mentioned before we got started, that you've been working for years to get your information online. It's like for years we've been talking about this, like how would we do this, what would it look like, because we recognize that, well, part of it's from teaching hypnobirthing classes for so many years. Like our classes included home birth people as well as people in the hospital, and just hearing stories even in that group who was educated and making choices of how difficult their birth experiences were or serious trauma that happened with them. We felt really motivated to provide this type of really supportive partnership style care for people choosing other birth locations besides home, recognizing that most home birth midwives are offering something similar to what we can offer, recognizing that there's so many people out there who just have no idea what they're getting into. They might think this is a natural process. My body knows how to do this. I'll just get my doctor. And then when I walk into the hospital, I'll tell them I want to have a natural birth and it's all going to work out. And recognizing that, no, it's not all going to work out because there's so many pieces that go into being prepared to have a birth. And so that's what we've spent all this time doing, is organizing our knowledge into this basic system we call the birth system, BIRTH. And with the idea that we're helping people prepare by walking them through these 5 steps. And then we've created 3 different programs around that. We've created a one-on-one coaching, which is similar to it's like having a pregnancy coach through 6 months of your pregnancy, which we figured was probably an average time that people would want to have that type of coaching, where they can have one-on-one support throughout. And then we have a live small group class where they would have support in small groups, the opportunity for coaching in that way, as well as having access to our foundational basic class. And then we have the basic kind of self-study class, although by the time you air this, we will launch that first class, which is going to be a live class. And then after that, it will just be something people can access at any time, just kind of an evergreen class. That's a basic overview. Maybe you have some questions, or maybe Rhione wants to add some things to that.
I like what you said. That's what we're doing. It was really a beautiful day, actually, when we had a wall of our office covered in notes and realized, oh my gosh, this is everything. And look, it's a sanctuary. We realized sanctuary birthing has to do with these sanctuary of the mama baby and the concentric circles of sanctuary created by the support around her. And oh my gosh, we actually do have a system, and we didn't know that we had a system. So we've put it into the BIRTH as ways of organizing, and now we have a way of sharing to more than just people in our own neighboring counties. And we can share with anyone
across the
anywhere.
world. It's amazing. The technology is so amazing. So what are some of the things that a mom, a family would learn in your course? What are some of those fundamentals, some of those key points that when you created this sanctuary process, what were the points that just felt alive and you're like, this is it? This is what women need.
Well, we decided to start with birth. So the first step in our process is the B, which is birth. And because most people kind of start out once they get pregnant thinking about the birth, and it's also a big important part in the third trimester as a woman is heading to her birth. And so in the birth process, I think the biggest key to that is owning the birth. And we recognize that for a woman to really feel like she owns that process, it's a mindset shift that needs to occur over some months, because to go from maybe being afraid of the process to thinking you don't know anything about it, that you're going to turn all this over to your care provider because they're the authority, they've done this maybe thousands of times and you haven't even done it once yet. So it's a big mindset shift to recognize and see yourself as a partner in this process, working with your care provider, making choices that are based on your own beliefs and needs, and even understanding what those beliefs and needs are. That's a step. And we think about our journey as being more of a spiral. So it's as we're working with people, say over 6 months in our live program or in our coaching, one-on-one coaching program, we keep touching back on these areas as those areas are growing and developing, and each person is doing their own work around what they need. So that's one important thing. We also have an assessment that we start with people at, so people kind of doing an assessment of where they are now and what's important to them. It could be health related. It could be they're really tired, they're exhausted, they're not sure what to eat, they're having trouble sleeping, they're nauseous all the time, like I mentioned. So
Right.
that could be that person, or it could be someone who is really in a place of recognizing, like, I haven't chosen my care provider yet. I don't really know what's important about those concentric circles that Rhione talked about in terms of team. And so our fourth part in the journey is team, and teams begins all the way with just the mama and the baby at the center to whoever her partner is, or in whatever formation this family is in, whether however they are gendered, however they're growing their baby, starting in that center, and then moving out to what kind of support would help to optimize this pregnancy, to help the pregnant one to grow a healthy baby, to have a healthy body that feels good, so that women understand pregnancy doesn't have to be a horrible thing. You don't have to feel terrible through the whole pregnancy and then just hope that it can be over. It's like, having been midwives all these years, we've helped so many, many women to feel great in their pregnancy, to recognize, wow, this could be an amazing, wonderful time in my life where I'm really bonding with my baby and really connecting with my partner and setting up the kind of support that I need during my pregnancy and after, which is another really important piece in the team, is recognizing what kind of support you need after, because so many women come home from the hospital with their baby and just don't know, or families come home with their baby and don't know what to do and feel overwhelmed, or that can be a real risk for people getting depressed and having a really hard time. And so preparing for these things, that's a big way that we think about this, is to anticipate what is the next thing that's coming up for this person and supporting them in understanding what they need and how to create that and how to set that up. So those are some basic overviews of some of the steps, and maybe Rhione wants to add some more to some of the other parts of this journey.
I like how you spoke to each of those. It all basic, grounded, makes sense from my point of view. One of the things that is really important to me in our BIRTH systems is you can't drop any one of them in the system. They're all super important and they hold each other together. And that's why Jae talked about spiraling through. But the I, the inner knowing, the inner journey is really important. I'm super touched by that. And I want women to know, we want women to know that they can have a way to access and trust their deep inner knowing.
Yes.
That they can rest in it. They can make a path to that. I'm calling it deep inner knowing. You could call it intuition or you could call it instinct. There are many words, but when a woman is pregnant, she's receiving, she is able to receive a lot of beautiful information for herself, for her body, for her baby, for this new life, for this birth. And I call that her deep inner knowing. And it's available. It's available to anyone who wants it to be available. And once a woman has that sense of, yeah, no, I trust this, then if her midwife is saying, we really want you to do this and we're worried about this, so, we'd like you to do this, she can tune in. Of course, she wants to get information, like, I need more information, I need some evidence about this or that. But in the end, she is the one. And she can tune in and really trust that inner guidance. And situations that need what I want to say is this can be relevant in situations through the entire pregnancy, birth, early postpartum, and later. Because we are bombarded in this culture with what you should be afraid of, what you should expect, how you should listen to the experts, and where are the experts? Is it on Google, or should I call the doctor or my friend? It's like we're bombarded with information. And in the end, we get information, we collect evidence, we do our research, but in the end, the decision best comes from someone who trusts their deep inner wisdom. She will know, as the mother, this is what my baby needs. This is what I need. I trust.
The whole time the two of you have been speaking, the word that keeps coming to me is brilliant. This is just brilliant. And the wealth of knowledge that you both have, it sounds like an incredible, incredible program. It really does. And I feel so much of what you're saying, it echoes what I have found to be true in birth. So I'm so excited to be able to have this venue for you to share about it. So if someone wanted to reach out for your program, how can they find you? I'll have it in the show notes, but please share.
Well, we are on Instagram. We are on Facebook, Sanctuary Birthing. And of course, the website is sanctuarybirthing.com. And we have several different ways to connect. One would be, you can just make an appointment. We want to talk to you. So go to our website and schedule what we call a discovery session, which is a 50-minute block of time where we just listen to where you're at, what you need, and help you figure out, okay, what would your next step be, your best next step. We have several of those blocks saved out during the week. And we also have a workbook, an amazing birth workbook for people who just want to peek into how they can get their feet wet, get started at looking what this journey might entail. Did I miss anything, Jae?
I don't think so. I mentioned that we have this basic class. It's going to be a self-study class that's ongoing that people can join anytime. So it's another way if you want to go a little deeper to get your feet wet and learn the basics of this amazing birth journey, owning your amazing birth journey. So that's another thing people can find on our website as well. So
Excellent. Again, I find it so brilliant, and I'm so excited to be able to help you share it and get it out there.
Thank you.
So before we end our time together, that's been so incredible. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Oh, I've loved it. I've loved every minute of it. I'd like to ask my guests if they could share a pearl of wisdom, something that they would like families to know, any bit of wisdom. And again, you have over 60 years of experience and wisdom between you both. What would a pearl be for each of you, please?
well, I could go first. I would say that I feel like the most basic, important piece of wisdom is that your body talks to you.
Yes.
And I think in our really, really busy, fast-paced, media-oriented, screen-oriented culture, we stop listening, or maybe we never learn to listen. And yet every pregnant woman, her body will start to talk to her almost from the beginning. And so in any case, I think sometimes people need help learning how to listen, but it's an important thing. Start listening to your body. Your body is talking to you.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
That's beautiful. I love that. Your body is talking to you. I really like that, Jae. I'm saving that pearl. What is my pearl of wisdom? That women, I would hope that each woman before, during her pregnancy would take some time. Take some time to be still, sink in, connect with a deeper layer underneath all the mind chatter. Just even 5 minutes. Begin making time. Start listening. Because I believe that that inner knowing can inform us in the best possible way from this day on. And your baby's counting on it. It can change your baby's life and can change the world one baby at a time.
Yes.
In that way.
Yes. So thank you both so very much. I appreciate it. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much for having us on. We really appreciate the opportunity to spend this time with you.
Yeah, Michelle, it really felt great to be received and to understand that, what is it called? I like getting got. It feels like you really get where we are and what's important to us, and that means everything. So thank you very, very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Every part of my being has resonated with everything you're saying. So again, thank you so much. And remember, mamas, just as these wonderful midwives have stated, you can trust your own inner wisdom. And remember, just like other guests have said as well, you know your baby better than anyone. Thank you again for listening. And if you're enjoying the show, please share it with a friend. And you can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Because when you do, that helps get the show and the information out to more people.
For more great conversations like these, or to find out more information and access Michelle's library of amazing guests, go to birtheaseservices.com/podcast. For more information on the Birth.If method, Michelle's classes, meditations, and other services, go to birtheaseservices.com.